Okay.
Hold on, please. You're live.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. I want to welcome everybody to our first meeting of the Audit Committee in quite a little bit of time on this, what is it, supposed to be spring, but cold spring day. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Pam, I don't think I have to take roll, do I?
No, I can do that. I can do that for you.
Great. If you can do that for us, and then we can proceed
Great. Chair Wright.
here.
Regent Budd.
Here.
Regent Porth.
Here.
Chair Wright, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And I think the first agenda on the item is approval of the previous audit meeting minutes from January 20th. So I'd like a motion for us to approve those minutes.
I so moved.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. Do we have any edits or comments about those minutes? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? I don't think so, because I think I saw unanimous ayes. Okay, we can proceed. Melinda, I'm going to turn things over to you or Ben on the discussion items.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Elise. For APA update, at our last meeting in January, we were just waiting the release of a couple of the auditors of public account reports. Those reports have since been released. The community colleges 2018, 19, and 20 audits were released on March 16th, and the university's system office 2019 and 2020 audit was released on March 14th. All matters in those reports were or have been previously discussed with this committee, so I won't go into details, but we are currently working to ensure we minimize any future findings. I do believe the APA is currently working on their 2021 and 22 audits, but I don't expect to get any final results from that for quite a while. And we will continue to update this committee as matters arise. That's it for APA update. I can continue on into management update unless there are any questions. Okay.
I think you can proceed.
Okay. So system office accounting has been really busy with working on the college merger, especially the transition of our Banner financial system. We're moving into a new Banner instance for that fiscal 23 college transition year. But there should be no effect on our fiscal 22 close, since the new fiscal year will open up in the new Banner, and the old fiscal year will remain in the old Banner system that we can continue to work on in that old system. So I don't see any potential issues arise due to that transition. GASB 87 and 96 are two of the major standards I'd like to discuss that we will be implementing this year in our financials statements. GASB 87, which I'm sure you all know by now, is the lease standard. It requires that all leases that satisfy certain criteria be recorded on the balance sheet. There's no longer a distinction between operating and capital leases. And GASB 96 is very similar, but for subscription-based information technology. Essentially, these subscription arrangements are a contract that allows us the right to use a third-party vendor's IT software, and we will need to similarly bring those onto the balance sheet if they also satisfy certain criteria. Both of these standards require us to analyze essentially every single contract that may contain a potential lease. And because of the size of the lease and software portfolio at the colleges, universities, and Charter Oak, to ensure consistency in data extraction and accurate valuation and accounting entries for this initial implementation year, we have engaged Grant Thornton Advisory's team to assist us in a statement of work arrangement. And I know they will discuss that today, but essentially they will be assisting with extracting data from the contracts, from the POs, and compiling that data. They will not be performing calculations for entries. That's management's responsibility. But they will be assisting us with extracting and compiling data from our contracts. We are also looking into purchasing software that will help us maintain these lease and software listings in the future. Again, because of the size of our portfolio, which seems to be pretty standard across the industry for our size. And we decided to implement 96 this year, even though it's not required until fiscal 23 because of the similarity between 96 and 87, and also having, Grant Thornton assist us with that extraction work. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I have one. Just given the number of leases and leasing and the subscription arrangements, just can you talk about sort of I'm trying to get a sense of the size of the challenge and what are the positives out of that? And if Claire, if you're going to talk about that later, then we can wait until later to answer that question.
Would you like to wait, Claire, I think maybe it makes sense to all talk about it.
We can talk about it now. I think that's fine.
It's up to you. I'm just at just some point.
Let's talk about it. So in terms of, I guess, the first part of your question, order of magnitude, I will say I don't know what the I don't have a sense of what the entry to the balance sheet is going to be. $1 billion, maybe $500 million. It's still too early to tell. I will say it was, Melinda, how many leases were we looking at? Was it like 300?
So over 200, maybe 250 or something.
Yeah. So that, at least that's the order of magnitude that I can tell you right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was, if you have some big leases that are over, a 50-year term or something, it adds up quickly. So, but that's, we're working with a number of different organizations, and it's in the billions for some. So I will say, not to it's a bit of it's kind of like the pension accounting. Like I don't know how much value it's actually really adding to these financial statements. I have to be honest. I know this is a recorded public meeting, but this is the views of Claire Eston, not Grant Thornton. So we'll work through it. We'll try to, I guess that goes more to your second question, Elise, about what are the benefits. I think from a financial reporting benefit, I think it's more around getting your hands on what is going on in terms of how you're deciding whether to lease or finance versus purchase. Might be a benefit of this, because you might uncover some things where there's some inconsistencies across campuses in the way that they make those decisions. As well as just the policies and procedures around the approval process for entering into a financing arrangement. And that might be something where you'll get some learning from one campus to another, perhaps. I think those are going to be really the benefits to this, if anything.
Okay, thanks.
Still to be determined, and hopefully there's more that we just haven't learned yet. We're still early in the process.
Okay.
Aviva, and I see two questions now. Sorry, go ahead, Aviva.
Now that you mentioned the size, I'm curious, for accounting purposes, do they allow you to discount the costs going forward so that they do? So it's a more realistic commercial value, not just the aggregate of all the rents. And
Correct.
The age of the equipment, do they also allow you to put some value in the fact that you can buy it for $1 or something and resell, and all those things that happen in long-term equipment leases?
When you have certain terms like, bargain purchase option, things like that, that might indicate maybe there isn't a lease like that. That goes more into not necessarily the calculation of the value, but the outcome of the accounting for it, whether it's accounted for as a lease or not.
I agree with you. It doesn't sound like it adds much value to the understanding of your expenses going forward, but so be it. Thanks.
I mean, the only thing I can say is that they were trying to create consistency because the rest of the world beyond the US always capitalize these types of arrangements. So the idea was to get the United States on board with the rest of the world of how they do it. Is that another question?
Rick has a question.
Oh, Rick, yes. Rick, I think you're on
Okay,
mute.
Rick.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. You may have already said this. Is this a new GASB requirement? Is it, there's no choice in this, right? We have to do
Unfortunately,
this
there's
and-
no choice.
Right. And here's a very basic question. We have 200 or 250 leases. Is it mostly or all equipment? And if so, what type of equipment is it typically?
Our portfolio is a lot of copiers, probably more than half or closer to 3/4 is probably copiers. There's, I think,
Yeah.
maybe about 15 real estate leases in total, postage machines. There's also these really fun things called embedded leases. So universities, for example, if they, have an arrangement to use a third party's buses, but they wrap the bus with, Central Southern, that is Central or Southern's sole right to use asset. So we would need to record that on our balance sheet. So there's kind of a few different arrangements, but I would say that would be the bulk of our portfolio.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I think we can provide more of an update to the committee. Is there going to be a September meeting this year? Because if there is, we could definitely provide the committee more of an update in September around some of these things, order of magnitude, discount rates, types of leases, all of that. We could do that in September. We could do it in December when I know we'll have a committee meeting, but.
We do not have a September meeting on the record, but if necessary, Elise and I and Ben can discuss that and see if there's a need for other items to be discussed as well.
Okay, I didn't mean to indicate that you needed to. I don't know, I had it in my head that there used to be one, but when we meet next, we can provide more information on all of that.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Of course.
Melinda, back to you.
That is all I had. We could move on to the Cohn-Resnick audit planning presentation, unless there are any
Okay.
other questions or comments.
No, that's fine. We can move on.
Okay.
Good morning. Hopefully everybody can see and hear me. I was just trying to hide out in mute mode. Yes, the leases, that is just such a fun topic. I'm so sorry. That does not actually impact the construction audit though, so you're good there. So I think this will be a pretty quick update. We're just really here to talk about the planning for the upcoming construction audits of the CSEU 2020. Our planning has already started. We started in April and we've been continuing with our planning. We've been working with Melinda and the team to work out the schedule. It would be very similar to prior years as it has worked out very well. A very tight timeline with built-in checkpoints, and it has worked well for all of the universities and campuses and locations. There was a slight switch this year with swapping a couple of the campuses just based on what was going to work best for those individual teams. Very, very easy to accommodate that switch. So right now, we are well into our planning. We will be continuing to have our kickoff and begin our year-end field work for that week right after July 4th. So it's a little tight, right? Especially with right around the holiday. But again, that's exactly what your team has indicated worked in the past. That's what we've been doing since we've been in the relationship with you, and it has worked out well. So we all kind of come right back from that holiday weekend and jump right into the thick of things, but it works very well. We will start that week right after 4th of July with fieldwork out at the various campuses, continue into the next week. Fieldwork and wrap up continues through July and into August. In August, we do present a draft of the schedule, and if applicable, any management letters, which we have not run into any issues in prior audits, but we always throw that out there that if we did encounter any issues, we wouldn't wait until the final presentation of the draft to make you aware of that, right? Ongoing communication is key in these, and really the goal is for you to have the most information that you can. So while this is an audit and these are not agreed upon procedures, if an issue were to be detected, a software glitch that's allowing an incorrect authorization level, right? I mean, I've run into that on other audits, so I like to use that as an example, where we're running through the processes and the controls, and we find that a clerk that should have rights in the system to only enter information, the system behind the scenes was actually giving that individual the authorization and rights to do the final approval for payment. So technically, if somebody wanted to, and it was just an error and it was caught very quickly, they could put an invoice into the system, push it all the way through, bypassing everybody else's review and approval, and authorize it for payment. Clearly, that's an internal control weakness, and that's a problem. But things like that, if we were to detect something like that and find it, those are things that would be brought to your attention immediately to be fixed. And in that situation, and again, it wasn't your audit, it was a different audit. It was something that was brought to management's attention right away. It had to do with a software conversion. It was just an error, and they were able to fix it. It was only a matter of a few days that it had been occurring, and there had been no harm, no foul. And those are the types of things and the types of relationships you want with all of your service providers to say, how can you best run your organization? So if there were any issues, we would obviously be bringing that to your attention immediately, but a draft of any management rep letter or management letter, comment letter, would be issued with the preliminary draft in August. The final draft, once it's been reviewed by the working team, would then be presented to your team on schedule in September with, as far as I know, we are on schedule to issue your final report, the final draft, and any communication for October. Now, is that October meeting planning on happening this year, or is that being moved?
I don't think we have an October meeting, no.
Okay.
So we can take this offline, Melinda, Ben, Pam, because what I don't want to have happen is to have, typically a lot goes on at the end of the year that we pack everything in. So we'll make sure that, we give each of these issues the appropriate time depending on the recommendations of management.
If we need to tuck in an extra September or October meeting to address these last two issues we've discussed, we can certainly do that so that they're not waiting until the end of the year.
Yeah. And Melinda and Ben, I just ask that the sooner we know about the schedule, the better, I think, for those of us who have some challenging schedules.
Yes. So we will still move forward with the historical plan of having that final draft ready to issue for September, October timeline. If, like last year, we had it ready and then the meeting was moved and we didn't present for a couple of months, the final, but it's fine. I would rather have the final draft sitting and waiting and available for when your meeting is ready to receive that information. Because at that point, if there were any issues encountered, you would have already known about them anyway. So really, there's no major changes to the timeline this year. We're not expecting any difficulties or hurdles to overcome in that. There is going to be a change this year in the overall look of the auditor's report. It's a good change. It's a good change. I think it clarifies a lot. It moves the opinion. The biggest change is that it moves the opinion from the bottom of your audit report up to the second paragraph. So folks can right away, this is who's been audited, this is what has been audited, and this is our overall opinion. And then it moves down into who was responsible for what, who's responsible for the audit, who is responsible for the overall presentation and preparation of the report, whether or not there was any type of emphasis of matter or other matters that came up. But the biggest difference really is the transparency of the opinion. It's not buried at the bottom of the report anymore. It's right up in the second paragraph. So you will see a little bit of a change if you go to compare prior year reports to the current year reports. The wording in the placement of the paragraphs and the discussion points will be a little out of order. But it isn't anything that is going to affect or cause any additional work on your end. This is really the biggest point. Do you have any
Thank
questions?
you.
You're welcome.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Thank you again, Carolyn.
It's a lot less painful than the leases. Thank you.
Okay, then we turn things back to Claire.
Yes, thank you. So this is the kickoff of the FY22 audits for the universities, community colleges, and Charter Oak. The objective today is to go over our audit plan with the members of the committee. This is the culmination of the last few months of having some planning discussions with management around what's new and different within the system. I know there's a lot new and different every year, but we're really focused on what's new and different that would impact our audit approach. And so we've had discussions with management, we've had some internal discussions. We also consider things that are just going on in the industry at large, in the higher education industry, that might have an impact on our audit approach within the system, the three entities within the system. So, and frankly, GASB 87 is probably the biggest new and different item for this year, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment. And I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce my two managers, Chris Bradford and Dave Stoffel, who are here with me today. They've been on the audit team for many years now. I've lost count. So happy to have them back with me today. We had a couple of, in the material, there were a few slides. We're not going to go page by page. So if we don't hit on something that you had a question about, just ask us. I know the group isn't shy. So I will hand it to, I think, Chris first to talk a little bit about the timetable.
Thanks, Claire. So I'll just kind of go over this at a pretty high level. Starting, in May through July is really when we're focused on doing our planning, risk assessment, and interim procedures, which is a pretty consistent time frame with past audits. Starting in September through December, that's where we're going to do our year-end field work. Again, similar time frame with past years, and really the goal is at some point in December, meet with the committee again to kind of do our final presentation with the goal of issuing the financial statements within a few days after that. So getting into some of the significant risks in other areas, I think these are pretty consistent with the past year's audits as well, with really just one exception, which is the GASB 87 lease accounting. And I know we've really already talked about that. I think kind of the main thing we're going to be focused on is making sure that management's analysis is complete and that every lease that the university system has is actually being included in the analysis. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
All right, thank you, Chris. And I'm picking up on slide 54 of 76, just some of the other areas of focus. Again, these are similar to last year, just talking about the pension, the OPEB liabilities that we'll be getting the reports from APA, and our actuaries will be reviewing. And some of the other areas, the state appropriations and cash confirms, similar to prior years, procedures will involve sending out confirmations to any of the state authorities or banks that are custodians over those accounts and confirming the amounts, and then testing capital assets. Moving on, it talks about some of the other auditors that perform procedures concurrent with our audit, specifically with the foundations. Each of the foundations has a separate auditor, which we always get a copy of their reports to make reference to in our report. If there is an instance where a foundation hasn't completed their audit, we will tailor our procedures to perform additional procedures to get coverage. And then for the net pension and OPEB, as I mentioned previously, the state engages the state auditor of Connecticut to perform the audit of the valuation prepared by the independent actuaries. And as part of that, we'll assess the qualifications of the APA, as well as have GT actuaries review the reports that are provided. And the final slide in this section just talks about independence. As we've mentioned with the GASB 87, GT advisory teams are going to be assisting with the extraction of the data from those leases. And obviously, the independence issue there could be that we can't audit our own work. So we've worked with management to make sure there's proper project oversight and the management's taking responsibility for validating the sample of the extractions performed by GT and taking ownership of that work.
And the other thing is that there's segregation of the teams. So the team, the Grant Thornton team that's doing the extraction work is not doing, it's different people essentially that are doing the audit, which is another important safeguard for independence.
Yep. And so I think with all of the safeguards in place, we can maintain our independence throughout the process. So with that, I will pause for if anybody had any questions on that.
Any question or comments from any of the regents? No?
All right. And with that, then I'll turn it over to Claire for the appendix section of our presentation.
So thanks, Dave. Just quickly, I guess that concludes what I would consider our required communications in connection with planning the audit. We did include some slides. Oh, the only other thing I'll mention, and I was appreciative that Carolyn mentioned it in her discussion, is that we also will have a change to our the opinion, the format of our opinion, where just like Carolyn, this isn't something that's specific to Cohn-Resnick. This is across the entire industry. So we also will reorder essentially the content of our report on the financial statements. So the opinion paragraph will be right at the beginning instead of buried on page 2 or 3, depending on which report you're looking at, which I agree with Carolyn is a good thing. But that's really the substance of the change. So we can share a draft of that reordered report well in advance so you can take a look at it. It does also elaborate on management's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibilities as well to make it clear who's responsible for what and what we're not responsible for too. So thank you to Carolyn for introducing that as well. So then lastly, I did include as an appendix some industry trends. There's a lot going on in the industry, depending on any which way you look at it. One thing that caught my attention, I don't know if people had a chance to notice it, but there was an interesting slide in the S&P Outlook focused on pension funding. And unfortunately, Connecticut was called out as one of the states with the lowest funding ratio, which is such a drag.
I saw
But
that.
yeah, I guess you can only go up from here, maybe, I guess is what I would say. So that was one thing that I wanted to mention. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is a lot of my education, excuse me, clients are asking and talking about ESG matters, environmental, social, and governance matters. And in the world that I operate in, a lot of the questions are coming at what reporting are we going to have to do, if any, or what reporting do we want to do? In the regulated, or I'll say regulated by the SEC, that world, they are having to, public companies are having to do a lot of reporting on ESG matters. There's no indication at this point that that will trickle down to non-SEC organizations, companies, NFP, public, et cetera, or I'll say governmental. But it could happen, and there is discussion. So for example, the rating agencies, credit, S&P and Moody's, they do look at ESG factors when they're doing ratings on debt. And they use information available, but there might be pressure from them to start doing some more formal reporting on it. And along those lines of organizations that issue public debt or conduit debt, some of the regulators around, like the Securities Exchange for Conduit Debt, are starting to talk about whether they want to have continuing disclosure around ESG matters as well. So there's talk about it, particularly in the public debt market, of maybe needing to do some more reporting around that. So we'll keep an eye on it. I think everybody should be keeping an eye on it, and we'll keep you posted with what we hear.
Yeah, Claire, and I'd be interested in if Melinda and Ben have any thoughts about it. And I know for publicly traded companies and folks that I know sort of in those kinds of environments, it's hit them hard in terms of having to react to some of these either oversight or sort of these rating agencies that do take that into consideration. And I'm just curious, I know for state organizations, it may be very different, but I always think sometimes if you see it happening in one industry, the likelihood that we're going to be touched by it is probably high. And I just don't know. I'd be curious to hear if there's been any conversation on it.
I can say that I have not put a lot of energy into reviewing this. I don't know if Ben, if you have heard anything different than that.
No, I have not, but I do think that Chair Wright's observation that these kinds of requirements do tend to bleed from one sector into another is true. I know that there's a powerful, the GASB tends to want to impose private sector accounting standards into the GASB world, just on principle, that they think that they should be making GASB more like FASB and be, when the publicly traded companies start doing something, why not apply it to not-for-profit and governmental organizations? I tend to think that that has not been to our benefit, but I agree that we should keep an eye out for that to come. Typically, it's like 1 or 2 years later, it shows up in the governmental world. So I think it's worth us keeping our eyes on that.
Thank you.
That concludes our remarks.
So Melinda, Ben, any other issues?
I have nothing.
Okay.
I'm
from the
happy that we
region-
have very few issues for the audit committee today.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. I, especially as someone who's been sitting on the committee for a while and remembering years past. So I appreciate that. Any questions or comments from the regents? Or any other comments from management or?
No, thank you.
Okay, we're good. So I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I'll second.
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. I'd like to
Thank
thank,
you.
I'd like to
Have a
thank
good
the
day, everyone.
auditors and management for everything. You made this a seamless, informative meeting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Okay.
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Your live stream is stopped.